You know, very few of you have experienced being in front of a microphone and talking to the world. Some of us have experienced that. As we pay tribute to Rush Limbaugh, who, by the way, there are two that I know who are outstanding communicators coast to coast. One of them was Art Bell, rather strange kind of fellow, very intelligent, very articulate, and Rush Limbaugh. Now, Rush Limbaugh was a failure as a rock and roll disc jockey. He tried and tried and tried. Eventually, he had to move back home and live with his parents because he couldn't earn a living at it. And then God moved in and put him in touch with the person who had a vision that resulted in the EIB, or the EBI, is it? Yes. The network that Rush served for years. I had the experience of working for Art Bell as a fill-in for him back when he first began his coast-to-coast broadcast from the studio in Las Vegas at KDWN. KDWN was a powerhouse talk station. Now, I'm going to tell you something. You want to talk about quality communicators? We had them. Mike English, Ted Baer, Ken Stahl, True Hawkins. Pete Moss was on there for a period of time. Mark Edwards. Boy, I guarantee you. And there was a lady that was on there that I'm sorry that I can't remember her name, but she was good. She passed away at an early age. KDWN had talk 50,000 watts. We bombed all the way from Canada to Mexico, around the West Coast, covered California, had many listeners who called in from all over the West Coast, including Doris Day, by the way. And when Art Bell couldn't make it in from his home in Pahrump, which was about 65 miles over the mountain pass from Las Vegas, I'd get a call. Can you come and work for Art? Yes. Well, if not, we'll just play some of his tapes, because we had standby stuff recorded. But I did it live. I have to admit, I was flying by the seat of my pants. Because when you get a phone call at 10:15 and you have to be on the air coast to coast at midnight, yes, the pucker string is tight. But I went through a lot of that broadcasting. You open the microphone and you let it all hang out. Those days are over now. Everything's all recorded or rehearsed. Everybody has a producer. I didn't have a producer. I was answering the phone, handling everything, and it was interesting. I'll have to admit it. So I have been in a position to talk coast to coast around the world, because radio bounces. We would have people living in South America and in Australia would get a bounce, and they would comment on it. See, broadcasters always are receiving postcards of people who pick up their signal. It may be a unique and it's a freak, but it happens. When I was driving back and forth between Pampa and Amarillo at night, I'd pick up radio stations all across. Most of it was from XERF, Veracruz, Mexico. Paul Callinger, your neighbor along the way. I rode many a mile with Paul Callinger. Anyway, I've had that experience. Many of you have not. Let me tell you what it's like. It's frightening. The first time you do it, any kind of talk. You see, most of our contemporary talk was about current events. Now, we never got into religion. We had some people who were of a religious bent on the station, but they paid for the time. We didn't do that. And the secret to a good talk show is to throw us a crumb out there and let them all come after it. Some outlandish things. Ken Stahl was an expert at getting people fired up. Man, he would play the devil's advocate to a perfection. He was amazing. But during my stint at KDON, and I was there for a number of years, we experienced some very exciting things. The owner of KDON was an elderly gentleman, and he was always listening and wanting to improve things. He came up with the idea of a group, 3 of us, that he called the Snooze Busters, as a takeoff on news reporters, the Snooze Busters. And True Hawkins had a wit about him. He could play the dullard, the dumb guy. He could handle it. He would come up with the wildest stuff and get us off on some tangent of the news. And it was all focused on what we were reporting in news. And if you really consider news, it's kind of entertaining, especially if you let your imagination run rampant. And we did. We ran the Snooze Busters up until the day I left that station. Now, in Wikipedia, it mentions the Snooze Busters, and it doesn't mention me, but I was among the original group. Ken Stahl, True Hawkins, and Jim Austin. I can guarantee it. But also, Wikipedia says I went to Galveston, and I never worked radio Galveston. I worked radio in Pampa, Texas, Amarillo, Texas. I worked radio in Mount Pleasant, Texas, my home, and I did television in Texarkana briefly. I did radio in Bryan, College Station. Did radio in Houston. I don't think of another one. Las Vegas. Yeah, did radio in Las Vegas. Had a great run in Las Vegas. Now, unlike Rush Limbaugh, I had success as a disc jockey. I tried to do it later in Bryan as I bragged to my class that I had run a top 40, and it was terrible. Oh, I had some students call me and commented rather caustically on my abilities. But it's been a wonderful ride. But back to Rush Limbaugh. Rush and Art had the listeners. They were on buku stations, coast to coast. Totally different program style and format, but nonetheless, they were entertaining. As a matter of fact, they were, when I moved to Charlotte, Art was on the air in Charlotte, coast to coast, AM coast to coast. That's another story. But let me say this about Rush. If it had not been for Rush Limbaugh, talk radio as we know it today, all this sports talk wouldn't have happened. Because AM radio was going into the dumper. I mean, it was going to be flushed right down the toilet because FM was music, and music didn't have the resonance on frequency or response on AM, so we had to do something else, so it had to be talk. Either that or play old dramas or recordings of old shows or the golden years of radio. A lot of that went on. So AM went talk. The only exception to that was when we played the big band music at KORK in Las Vegas and just knocked the socks off of the listeners. That was music of the golden years, of the old top hits of the 40s, 50s, 60s. It was great. But Rush Limbaugh was responsible for providing many broadcasters, including me, a very comfortable living and successful career. There'll never be another like him. I don't know who we're going to get to take over. Oh, there's some on cable that are good, yes, but I'm not sure that they could handle 3 hours of hot mic like Hitman did. I know a little bit about that because my run was 5.5 hours, flying by the seat of my pants. KDWN, KDON, Las Vegas, Nevada. I had to share that with you. It's kind of unique to be able to say I did something that many of you would probably like to do but never got a chance. And that's what I get from my box of chocolates from right here in my little corner studio under the shadow of Kyle Field. Amen.